Steve Jobs. And the reason why he's one of my favorite storytellers is that I think he captures a lot of what I try to get across in these storytelling classes, which is that the main difference between people like yourselves or like J.K. Rowling, George R. R. Martin, Stan Lee, if we want to think about Marvel, maybe Kevin Feige, if we want to think about the cinematic universe, the main difference between you and them is not that they have this incredible, unique ability that's solely they're born with. It's not something that's unique to them. The difference between all of us and those great people are that they have really practiced their storytelling skills and really improved their ability to tell compelling stories, connecting with the audience and making the audience feel like they're a part of it or absorbing themselves in the story that they have to tell. Like Steve Jobs often gets listed as the best storyteller in business. In fact, I believe it was Forbes that wrote a big eulogy to him after he passed, saying he was the greatest storyteller that business has ever known. The thing, though, is that if you jump back to the 1980s, the most intriguing thing about Steve Jobs wasn't that he was this incredible storyteller. Actually, it was very, very different back then. So back in the 1980s, Apple were about to release a computer called the Lisa. Now, the Lisa cost $10,000 at the time. Now, if you take into account for inflation, that's about $25,000 in today's terms. So not a cheap amount, but Steve Jobs really thought that this was the best product on the market and it could compete with IBM at the time. So what he decided to do was to take out an 8-page ad in the Wall Street Journal detailing all of the details about the hard drive, the interface, the memory. It was just page after page of geek speak. The problem here was that there was no story being told. There was literally no story being told. There was no problem that was being described or solved. And most importantly was that Steve Jobs had identified the audience, which was these business-minded people that were looking to improve efficiencies. He identified where they were, the Wall Street Journal. But then because he was using geek speak, he wasn't speaking in their language. He wasn't speaking in the language of a marketer or an accountant. He was speaking in an engineer's language, which meant that the ad itself just fell on deaf ears. It was the classic marketing blunder of talking about features and not talking about solutions in a language that matched the audience's expectations and needs. So that's where he was in 1980. Now let's flash forward a little over 20 years later. Now, very quickly in the chat, did any of you own a Zune? Do any of you know what a Zune was? A what? Okay, so a Zune was Microsoft's MP3 player that they released in the early 2000s. It was meant to go head to head with the iPod. Now, if you looked at the Zune on paper versus the iPod, it was better memory, better screen, the resolution, better battery life. All of these things were actually objectively better than the iPod. And what did they do to market this? They took out ads saying, we've got 16 megabytes of data. We have such and such a resolution screen. We have this unique interface, and we've got this 9-hour battery life. It was very similar to what Steve Jobs had done with the Lisa. It was very similar in the sense of that they were describing the features, not describing the solutions. Does anybody remember what the first tagline was for the iPod? The very first tagline for the iPod. No one? No. I'll tell you what I want. Exactly. Priyanka got it in one. The tagline for the iPod, and it was used in the original ads, was 1,000 songs in your pocket. Now think about the difference there between the Lisa and the iPod, the messaging there. 1,000 songs in your pocket. If we break that down, Steve Jobs knew that the audience for the iPod was everyone. So he made everyone the core of the message. It was 1,000 songs in your pocket. It didn't give you too much of a story either. It allowed you to fill the backstory. 1,000 songs in your pocket. I do jogging a lot. So if I hear that message, I think of me on a long run with 1,000 songs. I'm not going to run out of music by the end of my jog. For other people who may be commuting, they could picture themselves commuting with 1,000 songs in their pocket. We also have to remember the time that this came out. The time that this came out, when the iPod came out, I still had one of those big like Sony Discmen, and I would have to bring a sleeve of CDs with me everywhere if I wanted to change up the music. So to carry 1,000 songs in my pocket, I would literally have to carry around like a 60 CD case, which just was impossible. The other thing as well is my Discman couldn't fit into my pocket. I had to get a belt strap to put my Discman on if I went out with it. Or the other thing that I used to do was throw my Discman into my backpack and have like a wire coming from my backpack to my ears so I had headphones. So actually, yeah, the Sony disc days, I kind of miss my old Discman in one way. There's like almost like a retro feel to it now. But one thing that this 1,000 songs in your pocket does as well is it identifies that problem of carrying around all of this stuff. My Discman couldn't fit in my pocket. Not only that, but now I have the opportunity to have 1,000 songs in my pocket. So the real key difference here is, firstly, it had a strong controlling idea. If you go on to page 1 of the workbook, the controlling idea is going to be the first thing that we work with. The controlling idea, I'll explain what that later on is, but this is what the foundation of every single story that you're going to tell is going to be. I mentioned this already, but he understood the audience and he made the audience the center of the action. It's 1,000 songs in your pocket. You're right back in the, you're smack bang in the middle of the action. You are the hero of that story. What you'll also find as we go through this is I'll spend a lot of time talking about controlling ideas and audience, actually more time